The universe had long since forgotten humanity. 500,000 years had passed since the last human had breathed their final breath. The galaxy, once under the thumb of human hands, now thrived under the rule of powerful alien empires. History textbooks, if they still existed, did not even mention Earth anymore. To most beings in the galaxy, humanity was a myth, a forgotten species whose legacy was buried in the ruins of a long-dead world. But beneath the cracked surface of Earth, deep inside forgotten bunkers and long-abandoned underground cities, something stirred. A faint hum filled the air, buried under layers of dust and time. It was a pulse, a quiet thrum of ancient machinery, awakening from its long dormancy. There were no grand ceremonies, no celebrations marking this moment. It was simply the quiet beginning of something long anticipated, humanity's return. On the surface, Earth was a desolate wasteland, scarred by centuries of war, neglect, and environmental collapse. But underground, hidden in the labyrinthine chambers beneath mountains and deep below the oceans, lay a secret fleet of human warships. These ships had been built at the height of humanity's power, designed as a last-ditch effort to ensure the survival of the species in case of catastrophe. They were not just vehicles. They were symbols of the human will to persevere, to fight back, even in the face of annihilation. The humans who discovered this long-lost fleet were not soldiers or warriors. They were survivors, descendants of those who had fled the final days of Earth's destruction, who had scattered across the galaxy and built new lives in the distant corners of space. Some had never even heard the full story of what happened to Earth. They lived among the stars, unaware of the true history of their origins, ignorant of the legacy they carried in their blood. Until now. It started with a handful of individuals, scholars, engineers, and explorers who had been working together on various projects to understand the remnants of the old world. One such team, led by a young woman named Lara Voss, stumbled upon an old archive buried deep in the heart of a forgotten military facility. It wasn't much, just a set of cryptic data logs and some schematics, but it was enough to set them on a path to the truth. Lara, a historian by training, couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was off. There were too many references to Project EOS, too many mentions of ships and fleets. Her curiosity led her to more and more discoveries, each one more bewildering than the last. And then, one day, they found it, hidden beneath miles of rock, buried in the ruins of an ancient city, lay the first of the ships. The ship was massive, long abandoned, and half buried in rubble, but still remarkably intact. Lara's team had no idea what they were looking at initially, but as they dug deeper, they found evidence of advanced technology, beyond anything they had seen in their travels. It was a ship, yes, but not like anything the modern galaxy had ever known. This was a warship built for a forgotten era, designed for one purpose: to reclaim the stars. The reactivation of the fleet was slow at first. It took time to understand the complex systems, to decipher the old codes and reawaken the dormant machines. But with each ship that powered up, the humans felt something stirring inside them, a long-forgotten pride, a spark of the strength their ancestors had once possessed. For the first time in 500,000 years, they realized that humanity had never truly fallen. It had only been waiting. The first ship powered on, its massive hull groaning as ancient systems came to life. Lara Voss and her team stared in awe as the ship's diagnostics flashed across the control panel, and the engine cores slowly began to hum with life. The light in the room flickered as if the ship itself was drawing power from the very depths of the Earth. Lara's breath caught in her throat as she realized what this meant: not just the rediscovery of a ship, but the resurgence of humanity itself. "What do we do now?" asked Jaron, one of the engineers who had worked tirelessly alongside Lara. His voice was filled with awe, but also fear. They were standing on the precipice of something monumental, and the weight of it was beginning to settle in. Lara didn't answer right away. She was too caught up in the rush of emotions, the disbelief, the excitement, the realization that this moment was bigger than any of them had anticipated. The human race had been erased from the stars for 500,000 years, and yet here they were, standing at the threshold of a return. "It's time," Lara finally said, her voice steady. "It's time to wake up the rest of them." They spent weeks digging through the underground facility, discovering more ships hidden in the dark corners of Earth's remains. Some were intact, while others had been damaged by time and neglect, but it didn't matter. Every single one was a relic of humanity's might, each one a piece of the puzzle that had been left behind, waiting for someone to finish it. As the ships powered up, Lara and her team began to understand just how far ahead humanity had been before their fall. The ships weren't just battle-hardened vessels. They were masterpieces of engineering, capable of warp-speed travel, equipped with advanced weaponry and defense systems that would make the current galaxy's best fleets look like toys. These were no ordinary ships. They were relics of a forgotten empire, designed to conquer the stars. But despite the ship's capabilities, the team faced immediate challenges. The people they had gathered, engineers, scientists, and historians, were not soldiers. They weren't military leaders. They were survivors, curious minds who had lived in a galaxy that had long moved past humanity. They were brilliant in their fields, but when it came to war, they were inexperienced. And yet, Lara knew they had no choice but to forge ahead. The ship's wake-up had been a signal, a call to arms for the scattered remnants of humanity across the stars. Lara began to transmit messages, ancient beacons once meant for long-lost colonies, calling out to the scattered human survivors. Some answered immediately, while others took longer. The first response came from a small mining colony near the edges of the Perseus Arm, where a group of humans had kept to themselves for generations. They had no idea that Earth had fallen, only that they had survived, and their ancestors had hidden their origins from them. The next was a larger colony, this one in the Centauri system, where humans had formed a peaceful enclave within a system dominated by an alien race. They too had forgotten their heritage, but their curiosity about the sudden messages from Earth soon turned into excitement. Soon, the remnants of humanity were coming together, each new group a small but powerful addition to the growing resistance. The fleet, once just a handful of ships, was slowly becoming something bigger. But even as the human survivors came together, Lara knew the challenges they faced would be immense. They were up against alien empires that had long believed themselves untouchable, that had erased humanity from history itself. Still, there was one thing the aliens did not know. Humanity had never been defeated. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to rise again. The first task was simple but critical: gather more ships, expand the fleet, and make the galaxy aware that humanity was not a forgotten myth. It would start with small victories, an unseen hand that struck like a shadow, unnoticed and unchallenged at first. But as each ship powered up, as each fleet grew stronger, the humans could feel it. What they were building wasn't just a fleet, it was a movement. And with it, they would reclaim their place in the stars. Humanity had waited long enough. The fleet, now growing in both strength and numbers, was ready. The shipyards were buzzing with activity as old crews, now refitted and trained, scrambled to prepare for their first real test. The scattered remnants of humanity, once separated by vast distances, were now uniting under a single banner. They had one goal in mind: revenge. Lara Voss stood in the command center of the flagship, Eos Rising. The enormous ship, one of the largest ever built by human hands, was a testament to what humanity had once been capable of. It was armed with advanced energy weapons and defensive shields that made it nearly invincible to current alien technology. But the humans weren't going to rely on brute strength alone. Their strategy was far more cunning. "We've gathered our forces," Lara said, addressing the senior commanders on the bridge. "It's time to send the first message." The target was an alien supply convoy, one of the many that crisscrossed the galaxy, bringing resources and reinforcements to the coalition of alien empires. It was a small group, just 3 alien ships, but it would serve as the perfect test. A quick, decisive victory would show the galaxy that humanity's resurgence was not just a rumor. It would be a statement. The plan was simple: hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy could retaliate. The humans knew that their fleet wasn't yet large enough to face the full might of the alien empires head-on, but they also knew that they didn't need to fight on their enemies' terms. With surprise, speed, and precision, they could deal a devastating blow before the aliens even had time to react. The Eos Rising led the charge, flanked by a pair of smaller, older ships that had been reactivated and retrofitted with advanced weaponry. They moved in silence, using the dense nebula near the target's route as cover. No one expected the humans to strike from the shadows. When the time came, it was a thing of terrifying beauty. The human ships emerged from the nebula like ghosts. With pinpoint accuracy, the first blast from the Eos Rising struck the lead alien vessel, tearing through its shields and crippling its engines. Before the crew aboard the second ship could react, another volley of fire erupted, this time taking out their weapon systems. The aliens never stood a chance. Within moments, the supply convoy was shattered. The humans didn't waste time to savor their victory. They immediately disengaged, disappearing back into the dark cloud of the nebula before the alien reinforcements could arrive. Lara watched the destruction unfold on the tactical display, her heart pounding in her chest. It was their first strike, and it was perfect. "Signal sent," Lara said, her voice steady but filled with exhilaration. "The galaxy will know we're back." Word spread quickly. The attack on the alien convoy became a legend, whispered across star systems, quickly turning into something more than a military engagement. It was a symbol of humanity's return. A ragtag group of survivors had just struck a blow against a powerful coalition of alien empires, and the ripple effect was immediate. Alien military leaders began to question how this had happened. Who were these humans? How had they managed to pull off such a precise attack? The answers were elusive, but one thing was certain: the age of complacency was over. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were sending a message that would reverberate across the galaxy. Lara knew this was just the beginning. They had only scratched the surface of what humanity could accomplish. The alien empires were vast and powerful, but they were no longer the only ones who ruled the stars. Humanity's first strike had set the stage for something much greater. They were no longer forgotten. They were a force to be reckoned with. The success of the first strike against the alien supply convoy sent shockwaves across the galaxy. What had initially been dismissed as a fluke or a rogue attack soon became undeniable proof. Humanity had returned, and they weren't content with merely surviving. They were here to conquer, to reclaim what had been stolen from them. In the aftermath of the ambush, Lara and her commanders knew they had to act quickly. The alien empires were not blind to the growing threat, and they were already mobilizing their forces to deal with the human resurgence. They had underestimated humanity before, and they would not make that mistake again. The Eos Rising and its sister ships moved swiftly, striking isolated alien outposts and smaller, vulnerable fleets. With each victory, humanity's forces grew more confident and experienced, but so did their enemies. The aliens were no longer laughing off the human attacks. They were retaliating. The first large-scale counterattack came when the largest of the alien fleets, the Xaltar Dominion, dispatched a formidable armada to crush the human threat once and for all. The Xaltar had been one of the dominant powers in the galaxy for centuries, their warships unmatched in firepower and speed. They believed that a swift, overwhelming show of force would wipe humanity from the stars as quickly as it had appeared. But the humans had learned quickly. Their strikes had been sharp and precise, designed not only to weaken, but also to gather valuable intelligence on alien tactics. As the Xaltar fleet approached, humanity was ready. The Eos Rising had already repositioned itself, using a nearby asteroid field as cover. The human fleet had also been upgraded, with new weapon systems and faster maneuvering thrusters designed specifically to counteract the Xaltar's superior firepower. The battle was brutal and bloody. The human fleet was outnumbered, but not outmatched. The Xaltar ships were massive and intimidating, but they were not prepared for the human tactics, hit and run, guerrilla-style warfare in deep space. The Eos rising darted in and out of cover, launching precise laser volleys that shredded enemy shields and left them vulnerable to secondary attacks from the smaller ships. Meanwhile, the rest of the human fleet targeted the Xaltar's weaker vessels and supply lines, cutting off their reinforcements and forcing them to fight on uneven ground. It wasn't long before the first of the Xaltar ships began to fall, their destruction sending waves of panic through the ranks. The humans had done the impossible. They were holding their ground. "We're not backing down now," Lara said, her voice tight with determination. "Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." For every Xaltar ship that was destroyed, a sense of pride swelled within the human fleet. They were no longer a scattered group of survivors. They were a unified force, fueled by the desire to restore humanity's rightful place among the stars. The Xaltar fleet, once so confident in their power, was now retreating, battered and broken. The human fleet had proven that the old empires could no longer dominate unchecked. But even as victory tasted sweet, Lara knew the cost. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties. Several ships had been lost, and the remaining fleet was damaged. But there was no turning back now. The bloodshed had only fueled their resolve. They had proven they were capable of striking back, no longer hidden or forgotten. The galaxy had been watching, and they had seen humanity's blood and steel in action. The question was no longer whether humanity would rise. It was how far they would go to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The war had only just begun. The victory over the Xaltar Dominion's fleet was a turning point. The galaxy had watched as humanity's Galactic fleet had taken down one of the most powerful forces in space. The once forgotten species, long thought to have vanished into the annals of history, was now a fierce, united power. Their enemies were no longer mocking them. They were terrified. In the aftermath of the battle, Lara Voss and her commanders gathered aboard the Eos Rising to discuss the next steps. The human fleet had suffered losses, but those who remained were more determined than ever. They knew they were up against an overwhelming force, but their first real taste of victory had shown them something vital. Human ingenuity, tenacity, and resolve were more than enough to level the playing field. "What do we do next?" asked Jaren, his face grim as he looked over the reports of the battle. "We've made a huge dent, but there are still entire fleets out there we haven't touched. The Xaltar won't take this lightly. They'll come back, and when they do, we'll need more than just this fleet." Lara nodded, her eyes scanning the star maps spread out before her. The war had only just begun, and the Xaltar would undoubtedly regroup. But what they didn't know was that humanity had many more cards to play. "We don't just need ships," Lara said, her voice steady with resolve. "We need the heart of humanity's old power. The technology, the weapons, and the colonies. The forgotten survivors. We've been scattered across the galaxy for 500,000 years, but the resources we need to fight are still out there. We need to find them." The next phase of humanity's plan would be nothing short of a reclamation of what had once been theirs. With the newly activated fleet and a growing network of survivors, the humans began a vast search for hidden caches of technology, weapons, and ships left behind by their ancestors. They started to uncover forgotten military installations, lost research stations, and hidden archives of unimaginable power. In one of the most significant discoveries, a team of human explorers uncovered a long-forgotten weapons cache, hidden beneath the surface of a barren moon in the nebula's outer rim. Inside, they found vast stores of advanced energy weapons, enough to equip a small fleet, and an ancient supercomputer containing data on the construction of warships, even more powerful than anything the current fleet possessed. But the discovery didn't stop there. Human survivors, spread thin across the galaxy, began to join the cause in droves. Hidden colonies that had lived in isolation for centuries now reconnected with the larger human effort. Former soldiers and engineers, who had long forgotten their military roots, rallied to the fleet. What began as a small resistance movement quickly became a galactic-scale uprising, as more and more human factions came together to reclaim their lost heritage. With the new alliances and the recovered technologies, the human fleet grew exponentially. They now commanded an impressive array of ships, each outfitted with cutting-edge technology that rivaled the most advanced alien fleets. The human forces had not only restored their ancient power, they had enhanced it. But there was one more piece of the puzzle that humanity needed to address. The weapon that had caused their fall in the first place. The superweapon that had erased Earth from existence still existed, hidden within the core of an alien fortress on the edge of the galaxy. The time had come for humanity to confront the true source of their destruction. The mission was clear: to destroy this weapon, once and for all. "We will not just fight for survival anymore," Lara said to her commanders as they plotted their course toward the enemy fortress. "We will fight for everything that was taken from us, and we will win." With their fleet larger and stronger than ever, and their cause now burning brighter than before, humanity set its sights on the ultimate goal: the total destruction of the weapon that had nearly wiped them from the stars. The fate of the galaxy, and the future of the human race, would soon be decided in the most daring raid the universe had ever seen. The journey to the alien fortress was unlike anything humanity had ever undertaken. The distance was staggering. Across uncharted space, far beyond the borders of known galaxies. Yet the fleet pressed on, driven by the burning desire to dismantle the very weapon that had caused their downfall. For 500,000 years, it had loomed over their existence, a reminder of the cruelty that had erased their civilization. But no more. This time, humanity would control their fate. Lara stood on the bridge of the Eos Rising, watching the stars stretch into long lines as they traveled at faster than light speeds. Her thoughts were with the fleet and the thousands of souls now fighting to restore the pride and legacy of humanity. This was the moment they had been building toward. The ancient weapon was within reach, but so was the very real possibility of failure. The forces guarding it were formidable, and they would not hesitate to destroy the humans once they were discovered. "We're entering the outer boundary of the fortress defensive zone," Jiren reported, his voice tense. "We'll need to approach cautiously, or we'll trigger their alarm systems." Lara nodded. "No mistakes. Everyone knows their role. This is our one shot." The fortress was located at the edge of a black hole cluster, its location deliberately chosen for its isolation and natural defenses. The region was a wasteland, surrounded by swirling anomalies, gravitation fields, and deadly radiation that had long kept unwanted visitors away. The aliens had built this stronghold with the assumption that no one could ever approach undetected. But humanity had learned to navigate the galaxy with skill and cunning, using their knowledge of old, forgotten technologies to avoid detection. As the fleet neared the heart of the fortress, Lara's mind raced. The weapons they had discovered during their search for lost technology had provided them with the tools to strike. But they had no illusions. Destroying the superweapon would not be easy. The fortress was well guarded by alien warships, and it was protected by a massive energy shield that could withstand even the most powerful assaults. The humans' fleet was still growing, but they were far from invincible. They couldn't afford to be reckless. Lara's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp alert. The enemy had detected them. "Stealth systems have been compromised," one of the crew members reported. "They know we're here. We're in range of their sentries." The bridge fell silent for a moment, the weight of the realization settling over the crew. They had anticipated this moment, but now that it had arrived, the tension was palpable. "Prepare for battle," Lara said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We're not turning back." The human fleet split into two formations, one to draw the enemy's attention, while the other would penetrate deep into the fortress's defenses. The primary objective was clear: disable the superweapon at any cost. The fate of humanity depended on it. As the battle began, the alien sentries responded with shocking speed. Energy beams flashed across the void as human ships fired back, their advanced weaponry making a dent in the enemy's shields. But the aliens had an advantage in numbers, and their warships were formidable. The fight was fierce, with explosions echoing through space as both sides traded blow after blow. In the chaos, Lara's mind remained focused. Her fleet was holding steady, but she knew this was a test, one that would determine whether humanity could not only survive but thrive once again. There was no time for second guesses. Every decision had to be perfect, every strike had to count. All units engage full firepower, Lara ordered, her voice ringing with authority. We end this here. The moment of truth had arrived. Humanity's fleet pressed deeper into the fortress, inching closer to the weapon that had brought about their fall. But the real battle was just beginning. The battle raged across the expanse surrounding the fortress, a deadly ballet of weapons fire and maneuvering ships. Humanity's fleet was outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity that the alien sentries couldn't anticipate. With every blast, they carved a path toward the core of the fortress, where the super weapon waited, silent, looming, ready to unleash its destructive power. Lara stood at the center of the Eos Rising's bridge, her hands gripping the console, her eyes darting across the battle displays. The fleet was holding its ground, but they were far from out of danger. Enemy ships were circling, trying to pin down human ships, and the alien defense systems were formidable. A single misstep could spell disaster. We're losing ships, Jaren said through gritted teeth, his voice edged with concern. He had been by Lara's side throughout this entire campaign, and the weight of their mission was starting to show on him. We can't keep this up much longer. Lara didn't look away from the battlefield. We don't have a choice, Jaren. The super weapon is almost within reach. We push forward, now. Her words were like a spark, igniting a renewed sense of urgency in the crew. The human fleet pressed on, each ship darting in and out of cover, using the same tactics they had refined over the past months: speed, precision, and adaptability. They were outmatched in terms of firepower, but they had learned how to fight smarter, not harder. Just ahead, the superweapon's massive energy core began to pulse ominously, a glowing orb at the center of the fortress. A wave of dread washed over Lara as she realized that they had almost reached the heart of the beast. The time to act was now. Squadron 3, initiate assault on the core. Lara ordered, her voice unyielding. All units, fall back to flanking positions. We need to buy them time. The strategy was risky, too risky, but there was no turning back. If they could disable the weapon's core, the entire fortress would lose its strength, and the weapon itself would be neutralized. But to do so, they would need to bypass the fortress's outer defenses and strike directly at the heart of the superweapon. It was a suicide mission for anyone involved, but it was the only option. The human ships reformed their lines, preparing for the most dangerous maneuver of the campaign. The Xalntar defense systems launched a barrage of plasma fire, shaking the human fleet. Eos Rising took a direct hit, the shields flaring before they collapsed under the weight of the attack. We've got hull breaches, a crew member shouted. Shields at 20%. Lara's eyes never left the display. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to remain calm. We can take it. Keep pushing forward. The final push came from Squad 3. With coordinated strikes, the human ships used their advanced weapons to disable key defense points around the superweapon's core. The remaining alien forces tried desperately to form a defense, but their efforts were disorganized, panicked. They weren't prepared for this kind of relentless assault. In a final, desperate move, Lara ordered the Eos Rising to launch a direct assault on the weapon's power conduit. This is it, she muttered to herself, bracing for the inevitable explosion that would follow. The Eos Rising fired its final salvo, a devastating barrage of plasma and energy missiles. The shot hit the weapon's core. Time seemed to stand still. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the fortress trembled, and a massive shockwave ripped through the space around them. The superweapon's core shattered, sending violent pulses of energy cascading outwards. The alien ships in the area were caught in the blast, some disintegrating in an instant, while others were crippled beyond repair. But the Eos Rising had done it. The weapon was destroyed. Lara exhaled deeply, her heart still racing. They had done the impossible. They had crippled the fortress, and the weapon that had once wiped them from existence was no more. However, victory came at a price. The human fleet had been battered, their numbers reduced. Many ships had been lost, and several brave souls had given their lives in the final assault. The galaxy would never forget what humanity had done today. But for Lara and her crew, there was no time to celebrate. The war was far from over. The aftermath of the destruction of the superweapon was a chaotic silence, broken only by the constant hum of systems aboard the Eos Rising. The crew was battered, their bodies weary, their spirits strained from the brutal assault. Yet, as the final echoes of the explosion reverberated across the battlefield, there was a profound sense of accomplishment. They had done what no one had thought possible. They had shattered the weapon that had once obliterated their civilization. Lara stood at the bridge, staring out into the vast emptiness, the remnants of the alien fortress floating like a tomb in the distance. What had once been an imposing, impregnable stronghold was now nothing more than a ruin, a symbol of humanity's resilience and willpower. But there was no time to rest. "Status report," Lara commanded, her voice steady despite the fatigue weighing on her. She had led them through the hardest of battles. But the war was far from over. The alien empires were not going to roll over after losing one of their most formidable weapons. They would retaliate, and humanity would need to be ready. Jaren approached her, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and awe. "We've lost several ships in the final strike. The fleet's been heavily damaged, but we've achieved our objective. The weapon's gone. The rest of the fortress is collapsing. We'll need to evacuate soon." Lara nodded, her mind already calculating their next move. "Prepare a recovery mission for the fleet. We'll need every ship we can salvage. And start broadcasting the victory message to all surviving human colonies. It's time the galaxy knew humanity isn't just fighting to survive. We're fighting to reclaim our place among the stars." With the destruction of the superweapon, humanity's enemies would now face a different threat. The Xaltar Dominion and the other alien coalitions had underestimated humanity before, but they would no longer have that luxury. Lara knew that the loss of such a powerful weapon would send shockwaves through the entire galaxy, shaking the foundation of the alien empire's control. As word spread across the far reaches of space, humanity's victory was celebrated. It was more than a tactical win, it was a symbol of their return. The remnants of the old human colonies, scattered across distant worlds, rallied together in a united effort to rebuild. The victory over the superweapon inspired even those who had lived in isolation for centuries to join the fight, reintegrating them into the growing human resistance. The fleet, though battered and bruised, was far from finished. The Eos Rising, still standing after taking multiple direct hits, would be their flag bearer. They had proven that humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and resolve were their true weapons, not just advanced technology, but the sheer will to survive and fight. Lara paced across the bridge, her mind filled with thoughts of the future. They had struck a powerful blow against their enemies, but the war was not over. The Xaltar and their allies would regroup, rebuild, and come for them with greater fury. But now, humanity had something they hadn't had in centuries: hope. And it was that hope that would fuel their next move. "I won't let them erase us again," Lara whispered to herself. Her words were a promise, not just to her crew, but to all of humanity. They had survived the fall. They had clawed their way back from the brink of extinction, and they would rise again, stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. Humanity had returned to the stars, and they were here to stay.